You could private message me on Facebook or email to greg@ageoutangels.org. And I want to remind everyone that you can donate to Age Out Angels every time you make a purchase from Amazon. And all you have to do is designate Age Out Angels to be your Amazon Smile designee. And a portion of your payment will go to Age Out Angels without it costing you 1 penny more. Do you have that also at Foster?
Yes.
So you could split it between Age Out Angels. We're all fishing out of the same
wealth.
boat here. Penny more. So do you have? It's okay. Now I'm back with Fran Gervasi. When you think about your overall scope of programs, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, when I printed a list this afternoon of their coursework, there were almost 100. I don't know if you want to call them courses or modules or whatever, but there were almost 100 different ways you could go. Is there an umbrella concept?
The most important concept we've taken with our training is relevancy. It's to make sure it's relevant to the parent. We want this to mean something and something they can use. And it's important. Like I said, that's the way parents learn. They've got to see a way that it can apply to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I want to take a minute now and talk a little bit about, I made fun of new programs and things earlier in the show, but I happen to love this one. This is called The Nurtured Heart.
Right.
And can you give us kind of a brief overview of what that is so people at home can misuse it later?
Okay. The Nurtured Heart approach was developed some 20 years ago by a gentleman by the name of Howard Glasser. And his company is called the Children's Success Foundation. And what happened was the state of New Jersey, Department of Human Services, and their CSOC, it's called Children's System of Care, was able to get, had applied for a grant, and they were using it to help get this approach into treatment centers. So the idea of the approach is to treat children with respect and to help them gain an inner wealth. Now, when Mr. Glasser started developing this approach, it took him a long time, but he started taking what he thought were the most practical and best ways to work with children who had a lot of intensity. You know, the child who would be called bad, the child who couldn't sit still, the child who would question everything that they were told to do.
I just want to jump in here and remind everyone at home that when Fran talks about respecting the child, you are not talking about enabling that bad behavior.
That's the beauty of this approach. Thank you for pointing that out. It's the idea behind this approach is to build the child's inner wealth, but also to help the child realize that there are consequences to their behavior, and that as a result, the consequences end up maybe causing some difficulty for them, but to figure out how can they then not repeat the same consequences. It's a really it's such a nice approach and way of working with children, and we find it works very well with adults. What you want to do is, so a child does something wrong. Normally, when a child does something wrong, we go into a litany of what is it they did wrong.
They got our attention now.
That's it.
Yeah.
We want to let them know what they did, and we become, as they like to say in the training of the Nurtured Heart, is you become the toy. And man, they're going to play with the toy that gives them the most energy, right? Gives them everything. So when you are giving them tons and tons of attention because they've done something wrong, they will do what? Let's get more attention.
Yeah.
Let's do it again. What the Nurtured Heart approach is suggesting, and what they really, it's not suggesting, what they tell you to do is, okay, Greg, I don't like that you hit or grab the toy away from Susie. Now, that's it. You kind of just drop it at that. But when Greg is sharing his toys with Susie, or he's being nice to Susie, you're going to turn around and say, Greg, let me tell you, I have to tell you how happy it makes me to see you being kind and gentle to Susie, because that makes Susie feel better. That makes Susie want to play with you. And that also shows just how kind you can be.
Mm-hmm. You're investing the energy in the positive.
You're putting it into the positive.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like it's kind of, you know, what's the all sunshine and hearts and not, but it's not. You really do set boundaries. You tell them, but they know ahead of time what those boundaries are supposed to be.
Yeah, and boundaries are the key to respect.
And you're setting the boundaries at the level of the child, not what you expect, but what the child is, what the child's level is, what the child can do.
Yeah, when I had a brief introduction to the Nurtured Heart, through FAFS, by the way, the trainer made this fabulous analogy to video games.
Right.
And she was talking about, you know, how video games just give them positive reinforcement. I mean, the dopamine is measurable inside their brains, right? But if they cross the boundary, if they make a mistake that, you know, crosses that boundary line, the punishment is swift and complete and over.
And it's done.
Right.
And
they go right back to dopamine heaven.
You can go right back into the game. And that's the thing. But you have to maybe sit out. I used it when we were training staff. I said, look, I play a game on my phone. I'm hooked. I am hooked on this game. And the thing is that I use up my lives. So what does it mean? I have to wait to get back into the game, but I know they're going to let me get back in.
Right.
And it's wonderful. And the idea is that we don't try to get children to forget about their past. The idea is to help them take the past, put it into a portfolio, and how can what's happened to me in the past, how can that help me build my portfolio? Because it's who we are. Like, I'm not the same person I was 25 years ago when I started working at FAFS. I've changed tremendously.
Absolutely.
And I happen to like the way I am right now. I really do. I liked myself 25 years ago, but I also feel I'm a much better, well-rounded person than I was 24 years ago.
I think of that too. I like me better now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, really. And that's what we want the kids to feel. Okay, so this happened to me. Terrible things happened to me. But how can I use that to make me a better person?
Yeah. Yeah. And with regard to that, I mean, you know, we're working with children who have suffered some pretty severe trauma most of the time. And there was that, you know, that whole old thing of get past it, you know, buck up, son.
Yeah.
You know, you had that experience, but now you don't. So put it behind you.
Right.
And we're finding that that's not necessarily how the game is played.
No, you don't want them to use it as a crutch. And you certainly don't want them to dwell on it and think that that trauma is what's defining them. But it's a part of them. And they have many other things that help define them.
Yeah, and it never goes away.
No, it doesn't.
But I suppose it can be dealt with, and it can possibly be used in some way that creates a positive outcome.
One of the questions when we had first spoken, you asked me out of my trainings, what do I have a special affinity for? Yeah. And I said it was the mental health courses. And I have background with mental health. I had a son who had suffered from severe depression, and he ended up suiciding at the age of 17. Now, I had to make a choice as to whether or not I would let that define me for the rest of my life, or was I going to use it? And I also found that the foster parents in New Jersey also were dealing with so many issues about about mental health issues because of the children coming in. And what do? So we take that positive You try to make it a reinvestment into something positive.
Absolutely. Who has access to your trainings? Is it limited?
Yes, unfortunately, it is. We're contracted. We're a nonprofit. We are contracted by the state of New Jersey to provide the training to all the licensed resource parents in New Jersey who have open homes. And resource parents means both adoptive and foster parents. And that also includes the kinship families.
Right. The fact that I adopted a child would make me qualify?
If your home is open. If your home is closed, no. It's only the people who are open now. Now, we have that. That's part of the situation of, because we have limited staff. Those 100 trainings, I have 3 trainers. And they write, conduct, develop, present trainings, because we do webinars, we do online training, and we also send what we call home correspondence courses. And that's a lot for 3 people to do.
It really is. This is not just a catalog that you could access, and
Right.
there isn't a live person necessarily at the other
Exactly.
end. There's more going on here. So I'm looking at the major headings of the types of courses. You have daily health and living courses, right? And that includes
Correct.
disaster preparedness.
Yeah,
is
we
included in
after Sandy occurred, we realized that the state and the parents in the state needed, because we had some families in the state who were homes were destroyed by Hurricane Sandy, and we thought, geesh, this is really something that we need to get out there to the parents and what to do. So we started out with a course that was what to do, what to prepare. And then we went what to do during the storm. That was disaster preparedness 2.
Right.
And then disaster preparedness 3 talks about what about after the storm. And not surprisingly, but because we hear about the survivors of Hurricane Sandy, we know what happens with them. It's been so long and drawn out that a lot of the situations have been, they're living in limbo. So the stress that creates, in addition to the stress and the trauma that occurred going through the hurricane. And then we decided we needed to add a 4th course, and that course is non-natural disasters, which has to do with the active shooter. If you're in a mall, what do you do if you find out you hear that there's a shooting situation?
Yeah, which just happened in Trenton.
Exactly.
What
do you do?
I don't know if those of you in other parts of the country are aware, but we have this beautiful thing in Trenton. It's called Art All Night, and people go into downtown Trenton to this huge sort of warehouse type facility where art is displayed, and we stay out and we party all night long.
Music and
yeah,
live music.
it's so wonderful,
fantastic.
and knuckleheads with guns showed up last Saturday. I guess it was just last Saturday, and
It was 2:30 in the morning, I think, it occurred.
Yeah. Started shooting at each other. People were killed. People were wounded, and it just it absolutely amazes me that unlike a typical state system, you can respond really quickly when you see a need for something.
It takes about 2 months for us to do the research, 2 to 3 months on the topic. And then what we do is, because my trainers are not experts in these topics, they all come from very
really
different,
quickly.
Right.
When you see a need, I think
It
we're hearing
takes
ourselves like
2
about 15
months
seconds
for
later.
us to do the research, 2 to 3 months.
So if you could get that out of
on
my
the topic.
headset,
And then what
I'd
we
really
do is,
appreciate
because my
that.
trainers are not experts in these topics.
That's what's on the air right now. It's the delay, just in case one of us.
Goofs.
That's a polite word for it.
There you go. So what happens is we develop the training, and then we send it out to be reviewed by people who are experts. So say our mental health courses. Some of them were actually written by people who work in the mental health field, but we will have them always reviewed. The disaster preparedness courses, we had emergency management people reading them and telling us. if we had the right content. So we make sure it's reviewed by somebody who is an expert.
Yeah.
Then we send it to the state to make sure that the information doesn't go against policy for that the parents have to follow. And then we bring it back home and we turn around and do the training. We get the hours assigned to it, and that's it.
And keep it moving. Yeah.
One of our courses that we've been working on recently, and this is very important because it's got to do with teens, is that we are working on a course called Youth Thrive, which is another initiative that the state of New Jersey is doing. So we're writing that course to help the parents understand what they can do to work with youth. Who will be aging out in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And there's all of these, perhaps part of that course could be to get them in touch with Age Out Angels.
Sure.
I'm just a suggestion.
Well, we put in agencies or groups that they can contact.
Can help them. Good.
We try to cooperate and work in cooperation.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. We appreciate that. So I'm looking at all these categories here, and you have things like, the mental health category, of course, and under each one of these is like 5 or 10 or 15 different courses. There are educational courses, medical courses. I guess parents will encounter all kinds of different medical situations that they may not have been prepared for.
Exactly.
Otherwise.
Asthma. Asthma is a huge one. Now,
or an allergy.
Neither one of my kids had asthma or allergies.
Yeah.
Never. But if I were to take in a child who was in foster care, they will, they'll turn around and call us up. The parents are the ones who call up and ask for the training. So that's how it goes.
Right.
We don't want their worker to turn around and say, you have to take this training, or to dictate. Sometimes there are situations where they do have to do that.
Right.
But in most cases, it's the parents who call up and register for the trainings, and then we send it out to them as they use the training. Now, online, they can access that 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then the webinar topics are live trainings that are given, similar to this. We'll do it over the computer. And they are able to speak with the trainer and ask questions, type in questions, and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Activities.
This is just amazing. Psychotropic medications and children in care. I'm looking at the mental health because I know that's your favorite.
Well, they're all my babies.
Dealing with adolescent depression and suicide, a guide to building and developing parenting skills. These are just wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful things. It's a breadth of work that boggles the mind. And you said something earlier that I just want to come back to for a heartbeat here, which when you were talking about training adults, you were talking about making it relevant.
Okay.
And I think that sort of grew out of special ed too, right? Because relevancy can drive that point home. It just made me wonder, should we have more of that when we're teaching children as well?
I think education has gone that way, a lot of it. It's also, for instance, a lot of people don't see any relevance in history. But a good history teacher will show and demonstrate and help kids learn how relevant it is, how it does apply to us in this life. And I mean, we have lots going on today that we can look back in history and say, this isn't all that new. This is not new. So that's part of what we want, and that's what we do want children to understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fran Gervasi, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this show.
It's been wonderful.
I hope you will feel free to come on or call us or anything, anytime.
Right.
And
we have
And what do we have? Of these free trainings, Lynn P. encourages families to take advantage of these free trainings. Is Lynn wrote into my Facebook page. Fran is sharing so much great information. Hope our foster parents in New Jersey take advantage of all the free training available to them from FAFSA.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yes. Well, actually, Lynn, I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to take it and encourage people to become foster parents.
Absolutely.
Just so they can take advantage of all the free training that's here. We're going to take a short break for a minute, and I'll be back with a few more stories, so don't go away. Thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hang for a few minutes if you
Sure.
can, just so we can talk a little at the end.
Have you ever interviewed ACNJ folks? I can't remember the name. It used to be called the Association of Children of New Jersey.
And we are back. It's always so good to have people from foster and adoptive family services on our program. That was wonderful. So here's a disturbing story that won't go away. GOP urges Trump to help faith-based child welfare providers discriminate. It's an article by John Kelly. Business owners wishing to follow their faith in selecting customers to serve scored at least a temporary victory in the U.S. Supreme Court's decision on the now famous wedding cake case. On the heels of legislative victories in several states, Republican leaders are hoping to help religious charities working in the child welfare arena do the same. As foster care numbers in the U.S. continue to rise, they argue that religious charities should be able to select which foster and adoptive parents to work with based on religious beliefs. 2 more states added bills protecting faith-based foster care providers who want to discriminate against same-sex couples and single parents this year. And some congressional Republicans are hoping to build new momentum for a federal law protecting such organizations. Now, there is a bill that runs counter to this, and it has been introduced by Representative John Lewis, a Democrat from Georgia. The Every Child Deserves Family Act prohibits any recipient of federal assistance for adoption and foster care placements from discriminating against any potential client. And the reason I rail against this has nothing to do with faith. It has everything to do with the fact that when you do this, you limit the number of people who can provide good homes for foster children. And I would not be in favor of anything that would limit the number of good families that foster care can go into. Another story that's interesting, because education is one of the biggest protective factors we can give any child to help ensure their transition to self-sufficiency and success as an adult will go smoothly. And there's nothing like a little legislation to help ensure that. According to Bryn Albee, former foster youth and current child welfare caseworker in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania House Bill 1745 aims to give foster youth an opportunity for educational success by offsetting some of the financial stresses they face. This bill seeks to provide tuition to state and community colleges to help support foster youth as they embark on their educational goals. And we had from Foster and Adoptive Family Services, Margie Blickard here about 3 or 4 weeks ago. She was their scholarship expert, and we were talking about how in New Jersey, the words college is free if you're in foster care don't necessarily apply, and there are gaps. Even when you think you're being covered, there are still gaps. And you know, I can't tell you how many aged out foster youth I've had contact me and say things like, I was adopted before the age of 13. Now I'm homeless, but because of that, because it was before the age of 13, I can't get any services. Or I can get plenty of services. I just need another $1,000, or I just need another $750. And where on earth do you think they're supposed to get that money? It just boggles the mind. Here's some good news from Roselle Park, New Jersey. Christopher Reardon writes about a good organization called Community Access Unlimited, CAU, celebrated the achievements of 15 at-risk youth who are members of the agency's Transitional Opportunities Program. Each of these youth are within New Jersey Child Services system and face a number of life challenges before coming to Community Access Unlimited and joining the Transitional Opportunities Program. Since then, they've made significant progress in plotting a brighter future with the help of the agency and its counselors. CAU, in case you're wondering, Community Access Unlimited is a statewide Union County-based nonprofit providing support programs and services to adults with disabilities, as well as youth served under the Department of Children and Families, to enable them to live independently in the community. And speaking of youth and adults with disabilities, we are going to have an organization called PCIL in here in August who do exactly that. CAU, however, is statewide Union County based, and they have this program called TOP, Transitional Opportunities Program, that provides housing for at-risk youth aged 13 to 21 and life skills training necessary to enable these young people to live independently in the community when they age out of the child services system. Top members coordinate with counselors to define goals they work on to achieve as they move towards adulthood. Now, we've been talking for the last 3 weeks about an article that was ingrained into my brain that was actually in Teen Vogue, of all places, called the Foster Care to Prison Pipeline, and how it works. And I told you the story about Randy, who entered into foster care when he was 10 and had 13 placements in the New York area, and got into a fight. Police were called, and he ended up serving 14 months in juvenile detention. He had a second fight when he was 17 years old, and that time police were called again, and he was incarcerated for 8 months in adult jail in Rikers Island. And certain populations within foster care are disproportionately at risk for criminalization as well. Black children are around twice as likely to be placed in foster care as white kids. And because black kids are already subject to disproportionate rates of school discipline and criminalization, being a foster youth just compounds this risk further. Foster youth, particularly girls, are targeted by sex traffickers, and the criminalization of sex work can funnel these victims of modern-day slavery into the criminal justice system. Another major driver is something that you heard a while ago if you were listening to Fran Gervasi, the criminalization of mental illness, which is one of the horrible things that we do in this country. A lady named Ariana, foster youth, says she can be locked up for going through a mental health crisis. She's 23 years old now, and she told Teen Vogue that she went to juvenile hall 4 times, twice for fighting and twice for mental health crises. She quotes, "I had to stay there for like 3 weeks, and it was terrifying," Ariana says, about the first time she was incarcerated for a mental health crisis. "The lady told me that if I didn't calm down, she would have to restrain me." Now, Ariana entered foster care at age 15 after showing up to school with bruises from her mom, who she says was mentally, verbally, and physically abusive. Foster care was supposed to keep her safe, but Ariana says it just made things worse. She was constantly bounced around between group homes and stints in juvenile hall. Although she's been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety, Ariana was provided with minimal and sporadic mental health care. Being incarcerated instead of receiving the support she needed has had serious consequences on her life. She's been homeless and couch surfing since she was aged out of the program 2 years ago. Now, advocates support a number of solutions, and that's what I wanted to talk just briefly about tonight to combat the foster care to prison pipeline. Young people need adequate mental health services with close regulation and use of psychotropic medications on children. Trauma-informed care should be implemented in all systems dealing with children. They believe there should be drastic reduction or elimination of group homes with strict regulations on when staff can call police. All states should pass and implement anti-discrimination policies to protect LGBTQ youth in the child welfare system, and that currently only exists in 27 states. And because it is Gay Pride Month in June, that would be an absolutely fabulous time to do that. We're going to talk more about solutions next week, but for now, I just wanted to say thank you very much. It's been a wonderful hour that we've spent together. Thanks to Kurt Seldemridge for providing the music for us. Thanks to Fran Gervasi for being my guest. Join me next week when Lorraine Wilkerson from Child Placement Services will be my guest. Let's make this week the best week ever. Good night.